I don't know if it was covered, but we had objected under 352 to the testimony of the special agent based on our belief that the discussion about the brother was more prejudicial than probative, and in addition, we object to the general relevancy of this, Your Honor, just for the record.
Right, that clarifies, I suppose, what I said earlier.
Yes, thank you.
On Thursday, I expect we'll start a little late so that we can have that hearing. Shall I suggest 10 o'clock for the jurors on Thursday?
Sure, whatever the court thinks, Your Honor.
Okay. And you'll be able to finish if we start at 10 o'clock on that day? You'll complete your...
I mean, I think what I'll probably do, Your Honor, is I will probably ask the court after the defense has presented if the court needs any cross-examination for its decision. If the court tells me that it doesn't, then I won't ask anything.
Okay.
Unless you want me to.
That's the first time
Much as I enjoy...
That's the first time I'm like kind of not sure what to say.
Yeah, no, I enjoy your cross-examination very much, but just the same, I'll be practical about it.
Thanks, Your Honor.
And People versus Robert Durst, and counsel all are present. Before you return to the witness, let me clarify something about our schedule. It appears that the prosecution will be winding up its case this week, all right? And that means, so we're going to be a little late on Thursday. We have some things to discuss that you don't need to be here for until 10 o'clock. So a slightly late start on Thursday, and then we'll expect and hope to finish the people's case on that day. The following Monday, you're going to have that day off. You're going to have that day off because we have some other work to do before we commence with the defense case. That should be Tuesday, all right? So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And now I'm chatting with everyone about Fridays during the month of August. So because we'll be missing Monday of that week, we'll be missing Tuesday of the following week. We'll still have 4-day weeks if we work on Fridays. So anyway, I'm just putting it out there for you to think about and let me know in writing if any Friday in August is a problem. I know we have a juror who typically leaves on the Thursday, and so let me know if that's an issue for you, and that's fine. I'm just trying to be most efficient with our days in August so that we complete it on time. All right? We're on track, but I just want to be confident. And you raise your hand, but you can write me a note. But a quick question, if that's okay. Alternate one, yes?
Yes. Can we? Some of the dates that you mentioned that we have off, at some point today, could we have like a recap of those dates with the actual like date?
Yes.
I'm getting confused.
Yes, and part of the problem is that we shifted a little bit. I mean, we missed a couple of days that weren't scheduled, and so we've adjusted a little bit. I've gotten some concessions on other days, so that anyway, it's confusing. I understand. I will clarify it later today for you. All right, and write me a note if you have a problem with any of those Fridays in August. With that, let's resume, Mr. Lewin, with the testimony of Mr. Perry. And I'm going to remind you you're under oath.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor.
Special Agent Perry, that call which took place in the middle of February 2019 with Jarecki and Smerling and myself, it was your understanding based on the call that was the first contact between myself and Jarecki and Smerling, correct?
That's my recollection, it was.
And during that call, did they agree to show the myself and LAPD detectives the Bob Durst interviews that they had done?
I can't remember if it was during that call. I know we did it at a later date. I'm not sure exactly if it was agreed upon at that call.
During that call, do you recall, Special Agent Perry, was it made clear to Jarecki and Smerling that we would review any evidence that they gave to us?
Yes, that was stated to them.
Was it also made clear to them during that call that it was going to be a one-way street and that they were not going to get access to any stuff that we had?
Yes, that was clearly, I have a clear recollection of that. I believe that was discussed on multiple occasions.
And do you recall the term one-way street? Was that actually used?
Yes, that's a term I use as well.
During that call, were Jarecki and Smerling also advised that we did not have a legal right to prevent them from doing whatever they were going to do, but that they needed to understand that they were not our agents and that what they did was up to them?
Yes, that was made clear to them.
All right, I want to go forward. On February 20th, 2013, did you send Detective Shamlian records of Bob Durst Ford Explorer from Harper Ford with respect to the mileage and timing?
Yes, I did.
On February 26th and 27th, 2013, were you out in Los Angeles?
Yes, I was.
And was that for a multi-day meeting at the FBI on this case?
Yes.
Did that involve you, Special Agent, Detective Shamlian, Detective Becerra, Westchester County DA Ed Murphy, myself, and other FBI personnel?
Yes, we had several individuals at this meeting, to include the individuals you named.
On November 8th and 9th of 2013, did you accompany myself, Detective Shamlian, Deputy DA Balian, another Deputy DA from my office to the Annex Satellite Office in Santa Monica?
Yes, I was present at a meeting.
And what was the purpose of that meeting?
That was a meeting with Mr. Jarecki and Mr. Smerling to review the audio videotapes from Mr. Durst.
And they showed, is it correct, excerpts of now what have been shown in court of Bob Durst's interviews from 2010 and 2012 with Jarecki and Smerling?
Yes, they did. That video is what we watched.
Did you have further contact with Detective Shamlian and other detectives from LAPD's Robbery Homicide Division?
We were in routine contact with them pretty much from November of 2012 through 2015. We're in routine contact with each other.
And at this point in time, between those time periods, what would you characterize your involvement in the case? What were you doing?
Our goal, like I said, now that the LAPD was fully invested in fully investigating their file or their investigation, my role definitely took a back seat. I was just more of a facilitator to help bring resources from the FBI to assist the LAPD's robbery homicide investigation in their investigation with stuff that may be outside the state or any kind of technical resources and or administrative resources.
Were you present on November 10th, 2014 for a meeting at the Westchester County DA's office in New York between Westchester DA personnel, myself, Deputy DA Balian, Detective Shamlian and Camacho from the Robbery Homicide Division, and various FBI personnel?
Yes, I was.
And was the purpose of this meeting to discuss and exchange information regarding Kathy Durst and Susan Berman cases and to let Westchester County know that we were going to be working on the Kathy Durst case out here?
Yes, the purpose of that meeting, we actually were trying to get all of the case files that was in the possession of the Westchester County DA's office transferred out to the Los Angeles Robbery Homicide Division and the DA's office.
And did you, later on that day, did you participate with myself and Deputy DA Balian and the LAPD detectives going through evidence at the New York State Police Task Force offices in Hawthorne, New York?
Yes, I did.
One moment. On At some point in time, was there discussion about authenticating the actual recorded interviews involving Bob Durst and Jarecki and Smerling?
Yes.
And these conversations took place years before the stipulation in this case was agreed to, that the parts that would be shown at trial were unedited. Is that correct?
I'm not familiar when the stipulation was dated, but I can tell you that it's been several years for that to occur.
And Special Agent Perry, at that point in time, is it fair to say that it was a priority to make sure that the recordings were authenticated, that we could put them on and show that they were not edited, altered, etc.?
That was one of our main priorities.
And with respect to that, on November 24, 2014, did you participate in a conversation with myself, as well as Detective Shamlian, and members of the FBI Crime Laboratory?
Yes, I did.
And was the purpose of that to discuss the FBI doing that work, authenticating the audio and video?
Yes, that was the purpose of the call.
And at that time, was it determined that the FBI was pretty short-staffed in that department?
Yeah, I know the lab was pretty short-staffed. I think they may even only had one examiner, or one, is what they believe they referred to themselves as.
And did they also indicate that they would need to get the original source material from Jarecki and Smerling?
Yes.
And are you aware if eventually that material was actually collected from Jarecki and Smerling?
Yes, it was.
And was the FBI involved in doing that?
I believe it was one of my partners of the FBI in New York that was responsible for collecting that.
And was there a second conversation with the individuals from the FBI Crime Lab, the sound and video experts, on December 2nd, 2014, going over exactly what type of microphones and recording devices Jarecki and Smerling had used for their interviews?
Yes, we had that conversation in depth about the type of cameras, the type of microphones that were used to record the audio and video.
And eventually, the FBI did not end up doing the work on that. Is that correct?
I don't think we did. I think it was handed off to another party.
All right, I want to fast forward to January 2nd, 2015. Pursuant to your investigation, did you work with Eric Van Dorn from the FBI in going through banking records related to this case?
Eric Van Dorn was a forensic accountant assigned to the New York office, and he was able to be assigned to our case.
And on January 2nd, 2015, were you able to establish, you and Van Dorn, that Susan Giordano had deposited a $38,000 check from Bob Durst into her bank account?
I don't have the direct recollection. I know there was a $38,000 deposit. I can't remember if it was at that meeting, but I'm definitely aware of that deposit.
All right, I want to fast forward now to the period of March 10th, 2015. Are you aware, were you involved in the case in terms of tracking Bob Durst's whereabouts?
Yes, I was.
Now, I want you to assume for a moment that the finale in this case, the finale of the Jinx, aired on March 15th, 2015. And that episode 5 aired 1 week before on the prior Sunday, which would have been March 8th. So I want you to assume that for a moment. Did you become involved in tracking Bob Durst between the end of episode 5 and when he was eventually arrested in New Orleans?
Yes, I did.
Now, I don't want to go through everything that you did, but is it fair to say that you were in contact with other assets at the FBI that end up tracking and being able to locate individuals through cell phone and other means?
Actually, that's kind of my current position now, and that's what I was in that particular moment, in that time frame. That's what I was acting as a member. That's what our CAS team does, is to track and locate individuals.
And were you the liaison with a now retired individual named Scott Garriola?
Yes, Scott's one of our FBI agents here in the Los Angeles area, who is we call a fugitive coordinator, and he solely worked fugitive operations, where we would assist other federal agencies, the FBI as well, to locate and apprehend fugitives.
And pursuant to your responsibilities, were you made aware that on March 10, 2015, that there had been security footage showing Bob Durst wheeling out luggage from his Houston apartment and then leaving very suddenly from Houston?
Yes, I was aware of that.
And were you asked to try to track where he was going?
Yes, I was.
And were you able to do that?
I was able to for a short, brief period of time before his phone appeared to be turned off.
And did you do part of that through you or individuals working with you through getting a pen register?
That was one of the techniques that we utilized.
And what is a pen register?
A pen register is a technique that law enforcement utilizes. And in essence, what it is, anytime a person makes or receives a phone call, it passes through the cellular network, and that information will be routed to the phone or the recipient, but it will also be routed to law enforcement in almost real time. So we will see the phone numbers that are calling to and from a target number or texting. We also will get the cell tower and sector location of where that call occurred.
And was a pen register obtained on this case with respect to Mr. Durst?
Yes, it was.
And was that through a lawful court order signed by a judge?
Yes, I believe LAPD was able to obtain that.
And at this time, you are working with LAPD to try to locate Mr. Durst, is that correct?
Yes, we were.
And pursuant to the information you got from the pen register, were you able, based on your expertise, to establish that it appeared that Mr. Durst had traveled on March 10th from Houston towards New Orleans?
Actually, what we actually did in conjunction with the pen register, we were able to get his historical phone records for Mr. Durst, which in essence shows the same data that a pen register would. And I was able to determine that Mr. Durst's phone was utilizing cell tower along what would be Interstate 10 east of Houston, and then the phone no longer was communicating to the network. So that was the last call I was able to map, was east of Houston, consistent with being on Interstate 10.
And when you say a phone was...
Clarification is the date. Please clarify
The
the date.
date, I can't remember if it was right around that time frame, if it was the 10th or 11th. I don't have those records in front of me, or I don't recall exactly, but it was part of his apprehension. It was all a fluid steps to track Mr. Durst upon learning that he was leaving the vicinity of his place in Houston.
And pursuant to your responsibilities, were you attempting to monitor and locate where Mr. Durst was?
Yes, we were. At that time, we had his historical records and we had his a pen register, but it definitely appeared that his phone was no longer being utilized. So at a later date, I believe a couple of days later, if not a day after this, LAPD obtained a Title III intercept, which allows us to monitor the calls, the actual content of the call, if the phone was being utilized.
And was that, again, through a lawful court order?
Yes, it was.
And when you mentioned before that you stopped getting signal from the phone after you were able to show it on I-10, based on your training in CAST, can you tell me what causes a phone to stop communicating?
Phone could be turned off. It could be, batteries could be taken out. It could just be disconnected from the network intentionally, or it could move into an area where there's no coverage.
During this period of time, between episode 5 and episode 6, when he was arrested on, there's a stipulation, he was arrested on March 14, 2015, which was Saturday. Were you actively working with FBI agents and with LAPD to try to locate Mr. Durst?
Yes, I was.
And did you end up catching a break that related to New Orleans with respect
Yes,
to
I did.
Mr. Durst? Can you explain what you found?
As I was monitoring the Title III, actually at my house in New Jersey, I heard a call come into his phone, and there's a lot of, if you remember back when to check your voicemail, you'd have to punch in a code from remotely, and there's a lot of beeping going on, and I could hear a voice in the background, and from that, what I was able to do, I saw the number that called into Mr. Durst's cell phone, and when I ran that through a public database, I determined it was coming from the JW Marriott in New Orleans.
And that's a hotel, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
So in essence, you ended up discovering later, you found Mr. Durst checking his voicemail from a public phone at the JW Marriott.
That was my belief that that's what he was doing.
And as a result of getting that information, what, if anything, did you do?
I contacted my cast partner, an agent by the name of Chuck Williams, and together with he teamed up with a task force officer of the FBI, and they responded to the JW Marriott to attempt to locate Mr. Durst.
And was Special Agent Williams, was he assigned to New Orleans?
Yes.
And are you aware that Special Agent Williams and his partner ended up arresting Mr. Durst on Saturday, March 14, 2015 at the JW Marriott?
Yes.
Now, at this point in time, where were you?
I was in New Jersey.
Did you end up heading down to New Orleans?
Yes, I did. I flew down.
And when approximately did you arrive there?
I recall arriving late at night, kind of closer to, I want to say around 11 o'clock p.m. or 11 p.m., closer to midnight.
And that would have been midnight on what day?
I believe it was the 14th going into the 15th.
And did you become aware later that I had flown in very late that night as well to interview Mr. Durst?
Yes,
Subsequent to, had you and I ever met in person at that point?
we had.
At that point in time, you ended up getting a hotel room, is that correct?
Yes, we'd been up for several hours, yeah.
And were you and I briefly roommates that day?
Unfortunately, yes.
And unfortunately, for what reason? Yeah. For what reason, Special Agent Perry, do you say that? Or it's just general hatred?
Well, hopefully Mr. DeGuerin won't object, but I would fair to say that think about the person that snores the loudest that you know, multiply it by 10, and you're not even going to even come close to how annoying he is.
No objection.
For the record,
Well, if
he
you
is
like-
about
if-
as annoying as they come.
If you like that, Mr. DeGuerin, Special Agent Perry, did you later, and I don't know if this is a crime or not, did you later indicate that you were very close to shooting me in the head as I slept?
I don't think, Mr. DeGuerin, if you need more clients, I'll plead the fifth. If I can take the fifth?
You were not a part of the actual interview, is that correct?
No, I was not.
And after the interview, I basically you let me sleep in your room to get a little bit of shut-eye because I've been up all night, correct?
I won't let that happen again, but yes.
Now, I want to fast forward. Pursuant to your responsibilities, did you end up interviewing a person you later was identified as Susan Giordano?
Yes, I did.
And did that take place on March 18, 2015?
Yes, it did.
And where did it take place?
It took place, we initially started at Miss Giordani's house and then later moved to her place of employment.
And was anybody with you?
Yes.
And who was that?
It was an investigator, Don DeQuarto.
Can you spell that for the court reporter, please?
I'll try not to mess it up, but I believe it's DeQuarto, DeQuarto.
And is that an FBI agent or a New York State police officer?
He's an investigator with the New York State Police.
And was Joe Becerra also there as well for this interview, or no?
I know that Mr. DeQuarto and I had the lead on that. I don't think Mr. Becerra was actively involved in the interview.
Prior to interviewing Susan Giordano on March 18th, were you aware that she had been contacted on March 15th by Investigator Becerra and that she had given what's been known as Giordano boxes to Investigator Becerra?
Yes, I know that did occur.
Were you also aware, and had you discussed the interview that Detective Becerra had done the next day on March 16th with Ms. Giordano?
Yes.
Were you also aware by March 18th about a package, a suitcase that was intercepted by the FBI in New Orleans?
Yes, I was aware of that.
And were you aware that that suitcase had approximately $115,000 in it?
Yes, I was made aware of that.
And were you aware that it had been sent by Susan Giordano?
Can you repeat your question?
Were you aware that that suitcase had been sent by Susan Giordano?
Yes.
Now, when you spoke to Ms. Giordano, did you tell her in advance that you knew about the suitcase, you knew what was in there?
I did not.
And can you explain why?
the whole purpose of an interview is a lot of times to determine the truthfulness of a person and give them the opportunity if they may have, we already had one interview. I wanted to give her the opportunity to change her story and provide truthful information. So I wanted to see if she would come to us with the truth.
And were you aware that she had not mentioned anything about sending a suitcase to Mr. Durst during the March 16th interview with Investigator Becerra?
Yes, I was.
So when you spoke to her, did she explain to you how she had put the clothes in the suitcase and packed them?
Yes, she did say that she's talked about opening the suitcase and seeing the shoes that were in the suitcase. And I can't remember if she got into great detail about her packing it.
And did you ask her at that time during that interview about her having recalled the package?
Yes, I did.
You knew before you went there that she had attempted to recall the package prior to your FBI partners getting a hold of it and finding out what was in there. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And when you asked her about recalling the package, did she tell you that she had done that because Bob Durst was going to need his clothes?
He wasn't. Well, can you repeat your question?
When she told you, she admitted that she had recalled the package when you brought it up, correct?
Yes.
And did she tell you that she had done so because he had been arrested and that eventually he would need his clothes?
I thought she said that he would probably not need his clothes.
Did she mention his clothes?
Yes, she did.
Did she mention anything about the money at that point?
No, she did not.
Did you later in that interview directly ask her, hey, did you ever ship him money?
Yes, I did.
And did she respond, he has never asked me to do anything?
She did say that, yes.
During your interview at some point in time, did Ms. Giordano state to you, quote, and honestly, if I got $1 million check for everything that I'd done for him, I feel like I really deserved it. I mean, it was like, Sue, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you, can you go to the apartment?
Yes.
Did she tell you that?
Yes, she did.
During your interview, did she end up telling you that Mr. Durst had sent her a check for $300,000? When I say you, I mean to you or the other individuals that were interviewing her.
Yes, she did say that, yes.
And did she say that she had cashed that immediately?
Yes.
Was she confronted with the fact that she had been given at least $338,000 by Mr. Durst?
Yes,
was asked-
I'm sorry.
She was asked in the last month or two, and did she respond 2 months?
What was the last part of your question?
So did you confront her with the fact, did you say to her, so you've made like $338,000 so far, right, in the last, say, month or two, and did she respond 2 months?
Yes.
During your interview, did she explain to you why she had not told Investigator Becerra about sending the package?
I don't recall.
Do you recall asking her, and this is at page 86, lines 4 through 6, and is there a reason why you didn't tell Joe the other day about the box that you shipped to UPS to him, and she responded, no,
I do recall her being vague in that answer.
In terms of your work following your trip to New Orleans, did it involve digitizing the Westchester discovery?
I helped facilitate that using we have a unit called DocX, which
And
will.
can you explain briefly what that is and what that involved?
So we have a unit out of Virginia where they actually will take multiple like paper copies and they can scan it and digitize it and put it into searchable PDFs. So where you might have hundreds of boxes, you might be able to condense it down to 4 DVDs.
And did the FBI, pursuant to, with your assistance, did the FBI take all of the information on the Kathy Durst case from the Westchester County DA's office and digitize it for us to use in Los Angeles?
Yes, we did.
And did they later do the same thing with all of the information from the Galveston police agencies and district attorney's office?
Yes, we did.
What has been your involvement on the Durst case since that time?
My role completely diminished after his arrest. As I transitioned to, doing my current position full time, I would just be asked if I needed, to help facilitate, documents being shipped. Other than that, I had very little responsibility until now.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, Agent Perry. We just shook hands for the first time, right?
Yes, sir.
Although
It's been a while.
we've known about each other for quite a while.
Yes, we have.
I want to briefly go over what I understand the timeline of your involvement was. As I understand your testimony, you got involved because you got a call from a former or retired FBI agent that worked for Douglas Durst and the Durst organization, correct?
Yes.
And that call was in 2012.
And I believe it would have happened late April of 2012. Our official case wasn't open until May 22nd of 2012.
Okay.
Based on that.
Let's look at that just for a moment. There's a saying, old soldiers never die, they just fade away. Old FBI agents don't die, they go to work for big corporations, don't they?
Like I said, I think that's a fair statement.
In fact, it's you bring a lot to a big corporation or a private corporation that's looking for someone that has expertise in security and surveillance and protection, right?
That are common characteristics that at least I know for people who have gotten these corporate jobs, that's a characteristic that they are always looking for.
And I guess what I'm saying is your training as an FBI agent makes you uniquely qualified to help, I'm just calling it corporate security, but for security-minded people that want someone to be their guardians.
Yes, sir.
All right. And that's what happened here. There was an FBI agent who had retired and went to work for Douglas Durst and the Durst Corporation.
That is true.
In your investigating that, you'd learned that, in fact, Bob Durst had, along with Mr. Jarecki and his film crew, gone close to Douglas Durst's residence in the Durst organization offices, didn't you?
That was one of the complaints. Yes.
And to jump forward a little bit from there, you later learned that Douglas Durst succeeded in getting Bob Durst charged with trespass or some kind of crime, right?
I believe he was charged in the New York City court system.
Right. And you learned that New York City court system found him not guilty.
That is correct, yes, for the trespass, yes.
But in fact, part of what you learned was that Mr. Jarecki and his film crew were with Bob during part of that time when he went to the Durst place.
I know there's more than one instance, Mr. DeGuerin. The one in particular, it was provided that Mr. Jarecki and Mr. Durst were outside the property.
Right. And one of Mr. Douglas Durst's security guards, I don't know if it's the same FBI agent, but one of his security guards confronted him and told him to go away.
I can't remember exactly what the interaction was between Durst security and Mr. Durst at that time. I just know that Mr. Durst was seen with Mr. Jarecki outside the property. I can't remember what the interaction was, whether he was told to leave or if he was just monitored.
Well, whatever you know, it would be what you learn later, right?
It would be provided to me by the Durst security, Mr.
Okay.
Carr.
But at any rate, that's the start of your involvement
Yes.
in April 2012.
I believe it was late April 2012. It may have been the first part of May is when the complaint came in.
Okay.
And like I said, I know for a fact our case was open officially on May 22nd of 2012.
Then, as I understand it, the next thing that happened that you've testified about is that you got a call from Mr. Smerling, Jarecki's partner.
Well, there's a lot that happened in between that, Mr. DeGuerin.
Well, I mean, what you've testified about. I'm
Yeah, but I testified. I talked to Joe Becerra. I watched All Good Things. I started getting all the research. I talked to Mr. Detective Shamlin. I didn't testify to the stuff that we went to Galveston. We started getting all this information well before my first conversation with Mr. Sperling.
okay.
Yeah.
And among the things that happened during that interim was you watched that fictional movie, All Good Things.
Yes, I didn't know who Mr. Durst was until then.
Okay. What did you think about it?
I probably don't want my opinion.
Well, okay. At any rate, it was kind of melodramatic, wasn't it?
It's also
Overall-
outside the scope.
Overruled, no, it isn't. He looked at it. So you may ask.
Is melodramatic a good,
Well, what's your definition of melodramatic, if you don't mind me asking?
well, melodrama, I think that's a commonly used term.
It was definitely a drama. I mean, there's definitely some drama in that show, whether
Okay.
real or not. It was drama.
All right. You're not going to say that you based your investigation on what that movie showed.
Absolutely not. That's why I went to get the case files.
Okay, all right. At some point, after you talked to Becerra, after you looked at some case files, and before you ever came to the DA's office in L.A., you got the call from Smerling,
That's correct, sir.
Jarecki's partner,
Yes, sir.
who informed you that they already had 30 to 40 hours of interviews with Mr. Durst.
Correct.
And you learned also that those interviews started in 2010, didn't you?
I can't remember if that's when I was notified of the time period in which it was captured, but by the time we had talked, it had already been captured, obviously. I don't know the exact date, there's probably better people to testify to the last date of the video, but, the time period I knew had already been filmed.
Okay, you just mentioned the word capture, or used the word capture. I'm going to really ask you what you meant by that. What you meant by that, isn't it, that they had already developed 30 to 40 hours of interviews, not that he'd been captured someplace.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
He had been, the film, the interviews and the audio and the video interviews had already been completed.
All right. And you're saying that you didn't know that they started in 2010?
I can't remember if I knew the exact date range at that time period.
If they started, and I'll just do it the way Mr. Lewin does it, let's assume for a moment that their interviews of Mr. Durst started in 2010. That would mean that their interviews started before you ever got your investigation started, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I can, like I stated, my investigation was officially open on May 22nd of 2012.
And then you met with Jarecki and Smerling.
We met on December 7th. My boss, Barbara Daly, and I met with Mr. Jarecki and Mr. Smerling.
And then I didn't put here in this part of my notes the date, if you said it, when you pitched the case to Mr. Lewin.
That would have been in mid-January. We had the first phone call. We talked for several hours to advise him, along with Detective Shamlin, of the Susan Berman file. I don't think it was decided at that time that it would be investigated at that time.
In other words, and by the way, that was your word, wasn't it? You pitched the case.
That was the whole, that was our whole purpose of, getting them to, working with the LAPD to get, Mr. Lewin or the LADA's office to take a look at this case for possible prosecution.
Okay. So putting that timeline together, Jarecki and Smerling and crew began in 2010 with interviews of Mr. Durst. Douglas Durst, or his bodyguard, his security, got you involved in April 2012. Another 6 or 8 months passes before you pitched the case as you had then developed it to Mr. Lewin and his crew.
It would have been almost 7 months since we opened the case before, 8 months before I talked to Mr. Lewin.
Okay, so in the scheme of things, it would be fair to say that Jarecki and Smerling started this whole ball rolling in 2010, wouldn't it?
Question is vague, it's also speculative.
Well, I used the whole ball rolling. I'll say, started the mechanics of the investigation in 2010.
Okay, overruled.
On my investigation, absolutely not. We opened our investigation completely independent, not knowing that there was 30 to 40 hours of video of Mr. Durst. And there's, like I said, I don't know if you want to get into my investigation here as far as what we investigated in the FBI, but there's a lot more facts to the story.
It was my fault to give you an inexact question. My whole investigation, in my mind, I'm thinking about, as I said, the whole ball rolling. Mr. Jarecki and Mr. Smerling and their crew started in 2010, right?
Don't get a room either.
Gosh, I thought I could get a younger guy.
I'm so old I got to take them as I find them. Okay.
I got no comment on any of this.
Did you watch all 30 or 40 hours, between 30 and 40 hours of the interviews?
The actual raw video or
Yes,
the
sir,
actual
the raw footage.
post-production? We did, yes.
Okay.
I think, obviously except for, I think, the last episode.
You're aware that there were conversations between Mr. Durst and Mr. Jarecki that were not filmed.
Yes, I am aware of that.
You're aware that there were several takes, if we can use a film term, several takes of each interview, right? That they would, well, perhaps put it this way, or perhaps put it that way, or don't answer my question, but give part of the question in the answer so we'll know.
I don't recall that kind of direction being given to Mr. Durst, but that's my recollection. The video's the video. I mean, I would have to rely on the video to answer that question accurately, but I don't recall them saying, answer it this way, say this, or I don't remember that. It's just, I might not be, this just wasn't something I was focused on at that point.
Again, it's my inexact questioning that is probably at fault here. There were several times when Mr. Durst repeated an answer to a question in slightly different terminology.
I do recall something like that occurring, yes.
And the 30 to 40 hours, as we know, was edited down significantly to produce what was finally shown on television.
Again, I'm probably not the best witness to testify how many times it was edited.
Now, I didn't ask you how, but it was If you got 30 to 40 hours of interviews, and what ends up on the 6 segments is only an hour or so total of Mr. Durst, obviously there was a lot of editing, wasn't there?
Again, I'll state, I don't know how much editing, but I'm assuming yes, to get to the post-production, you would have to do some editing.
Okay. Now let's go to what Mr. Lewin, and perhaps what was a Freudian slip, called the finale in this case. And then he quickly corrected himself. Finale in the Jinx, the series.
Okay.
It was on a Sunday that the finale, the 6th segment, was to play, correct?
That is correct, yep.
You knew what it was going to do, didn't you?
I was
By
familiar,
that, I mean, it was going to play the bathroom tape, the stuff like that.
I was aware of what was captured, what was going to be displayed in the episode, yes.
And you and the others involved in it feared that Mr. Durst would run away.
That had always been a concern of ours.
In
Always.
fact, you knew, didn't you, from the history that you had researched, that he'd run away often.
Absolutely, that was one of our top priorities, that he was going to run.
And so that's why there was a series of increasing surveillance methods used during the week of, let's start with the 10th of March, 2015.
Yes, sir. That's why we talked about the pen register. We talked about the phone records. We talked about the Title III. Yes, that was because of our strong concern that he was going to flee.
Okay, phone records is first, pen registers come next, surveillance of a cell phone comes next, and then there's actual interception of conversations, right?
Yes, that all happened within a brief time period.
But it happened sequentially, didn't it?
Yes, it did. I believe the pen register and the phone records come together. Then that escalated to a Title III.
And Title III for the jurors is
It's a wiretap,
Okay, I
you know,
was,
where you can intercept the actual phone calls. If there were to be phone calls talking to each other, you can actually hear what's being said.
and it's called Title III as a shorthand term because federal judges are in Title III of the Constitution. You knew that, didn't you?
I just did, and that's why you're a lawyer and I'm not. Thank you.
Used to be.
I believe that you're telling the truth, yes.
Thank you, thank you. Used to be that you had to be either a lawyer or an accountant to get in the FBI. When I applied, that's what it was. Are you a lawyer?
I told you, I was a park ranger and a trooper, so I probably couldn't pass law school.
By the way, I took a different career path.
Yeah.
Okay, so during this week of March the 10th through, that culminated in Mr. Durst's arrest at the J.W. Marriott, you kept, and others with you, kept abreast of his activities.
Yes, we did.
And there was even physical surveillance from time to time at his apartment in Houston, right?
I do believe there what we call would be like a spot check. I wasn't part of those. Again, there's probably better witnesses to testify to that.
Yeah, I realize you were in New York, but
Yeah.
you were being kept abreast, as were all of the various agents that were interested in putting him into custody.
Yeah, I mean, like a broad, I was keeping, I wasn't like every moment, every second of the day being advised of what Mr. Durst, the surveillance on him was showing, but I was aware that we had people watching Mr. Durst.
And the applications for these various levels of surveillance were done secretly, weren't they? By secretly, I mean, it wasn't public knowledge that that was happening. You can go to a judge and give the judge an application for a warrant for this stuff, but you don't have to put that out publicly, right?
Again, I wasn't the applicant in those, but there's a thing called a sealing order that will often accompany a warrant, such as a pen register or a court order, that will seal it for a set amount of days so it does not get out to the public. That would obviously be counterproductive if it did. So yes,
Okay, so that's what I was getting to. These applications were sealed so as to not alert Mr. Durst that there was the police activity that there obviously was.
Mr. Guerin, I keep saying I wasn't the affiant. I can assume that they should have been sealed. I know that they didn't get out to the public, so I'm assuming that the LAPD would have issued a sealing order or would have requested a sealing order for those.
Okay.
Again, I'm sure there's better people out there that can talk about that.
Well, the point is, you had no information that Mr. Durst knew that there was a warrant for his arrest, which didn't happen until later in the week.
I don't know if he knew there's a warrant, but I knew there was action taken by Mr. Durst that would lead me to believe he knew somebody's coming to look for him. Something's coming down the pipe.
Did you watched the Jinx, didn't you?
I did.
And it came out in 6 segments, 1 a week, correct?
Yes, it did. Yep.
The finale in this case, as Mr. Lewin put it, was not to happen until Sunday the 16th, right?
That is correct. It was going to air on the 16th. Or actually did air on the 16th.
Mr. DeGuerin, I think you mean Sunday the 15th.
Sunday the 15th, you're right. The 10th was a Tuesday.
I'll do the math.
10, 11, 12,
I trust you that it was a Tuesday.
14th, 15th. Okay.
Yeah. I'll agree with you on that.
And the 10th, of course, came 2 days after the previous Sunday. The Tuesday came after the previous Sunday. And that previous Sunday, that segment had Mr. Durst being confronted with the envelopes in which the printing looked very similar. One that obviously came from Bob Durst, and the other one that did not have a return address and was the envelope of the cadaver note. You remember that?
That's 6 years ago. I can't remember what exactly that 5th episode covered. I mean, I can say that I do recall that being in the episode as a key moment, kind of like a cliffhanger.
A cliffhanger, but I'll use another hackneyed phrase with you. The handwriting was on the wall. Pardon the pun.
Are you asking my opinion?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so, being concerned that he's going to run, you guys, all of the agencies that were working together, were concerned that he's going to run.
Like I said, that was always our concern.
Sure enough, on Tuesday afternoon sometime, you got information that he'd been seen taking some luggage to his car, right?
Correct, yes.
And then you're pinging his cell phone?
We were trying to. The phone was off, was not able to be pinged.
Okay. Well, I just used a term, and you adopted it, pinging. That's kind of a shorthand term for the ability of law enforcement or the phone company to determine a general area where a phone is, correct?
Actually, the term pinging, if you need to get technical, Verizon at the time could only provide the tower and sectors that were located. Right, so that's technically, if you want to get technically, that's not a ping. But again, it's in almost real time, the cell phone provider is providing us a location of a particular phone, and it will cover a general location in which the phone had to have been located.
And that general location, as you were following it, was headed out Interstate 10 from Houston.
Correct, yes.
East.
Well, it's hard to tell, because I didn't have a direction. I just had a tower hit along the highway of Interstate 10 that would be consistent with being on Interstate 10.
Well, Interstate 10 goes east and west. It comes all the way out here to and ends in Santa Monica. But the important part was you saw or learned of the cell phone going out east on Interstate 10.
Yes, it was east of Houston on Interstate 10.
From Houston on Interstate 10.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I'm sure there are some jurors that probably most know a little bit about geography, but for the record and for those that don't, east of Interstate 10, about 90 miles, is a Texas-Louisiana border, right?
I've made that drive.
So have I.
It is. It says definitely Louisiana and Texas border is on East 10.
And after you cross the Louisiana border on Interstate 10, you go through Lafayette, Baton Rouge, and then you get to New Orleans, right?
Yes.
But the cell phone quit.
Yes, that's the last location I had for that phone was in the vicinity, general vicinity of Interstate 10 east of Houston.
And it's after that that you got the actual Title III wiretap so you could hear what was going on if his home phone or cell phone got a call or made a call.
Yes.
The next significant thing that happened was you're sitting at home and you have some hookup at home.
It was on my laptop. You could actually remote into the, I believe it was through LA Clear, where you could actually hear the Title III on your laptop remotely.
Can I do that?
Not if you're not part of law enforcement. You have to have legal authority to do that.
Okay, all right. So you had a hookup somehow that you could do that, right?
It's just my work laptop, and you go to a website and you log in with your credentials, and you can hear the intercepts.
And you hear what you believe is a call being made to Bob Durst's phone and an attempt to get messages off of his, what do you call it?
His
Voicemail,
Yes.
right?
Yes, that's what I believe was occurring.
And you immediately can track that to the J.W. Marriott in New Orleans.
Using just like a public database search, I ran that number that was calling into Mr. Durst's voicemail, and it came back to the J.W. Marriott in New Orleans.
And so you called upon another member of your task force. By the way, did you know Chuck Williams before then?
Yeah, Chuck and I are friends. That's why I called him, because I knew he was in New Orleans and he was part of our violent crime fugitive unit there.
And sure enough,
Chuck Williams is the same as William Williams.
okay, right. Chuck Williams is his nickname. He's big, 6'4", the epitome of a FBI agent, right?
As he goes, his real name is William Williams, so we call him Chuck. And he is a rather large, intimidating individual.
Okay.
Good to have on our side.
And you get in touch with him, he goes to Marriott, and the next thing you know, Bob Durst is arrested.
It was after several hours, I believe, of surveillance. Mr. Durst walked into the hotel and was apprehended.
Pass the witness, Your Honor.
Very briefly? Yeah. You were asked some questions about Mr. Durst checking his voicemail at the J.W. Marriott, correct?
From the J.W. Marriott.
Yes, from the J.W. Marriott. You were aware, Detective, from your work, Special Agent, from your work on this case, that Mr. Durst, back in 2000, on December 20th, when he was on his way to Los Angeles.
That was my fault. Sorry.
Were you pinging?
It's actually cell phone towers, not ping.
There we go. You were aware from your work in this investigation that on December 20th, 2000, while he was on his way to Los Angeles, that Mr. Durst had used a payphone in Garberville, California, to check his voicemail, correct?
Yes.
And you were also aware that during the original investigation, when Mr. Durst had fled to Galveston from New York City in November of 2000, that he had turned his cell phone off for large periods of time while he was in Galveston, correct?
There was definitely long periods of times where there was no activity on his phone. I can tell you that.
And my only other areas, Mr. Milius has pointed out, as a member of our Cyber Crimes Division, that in fact, the wiretap is not Title III does not refer to the judges. That would be Article III. That Title III is from the Omnibus Crime Control and Safe Streets Act of 1968, and that the third article of that section authorizes the wiretaps.
Uncle,
Like I said, that's why you're attorneys and I'm not.
We just don't want you going into your next case, and
I will hopefully get the transcript and I will refresh my memory.
thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor.
the other expression is calf rope. Nobody's heard that one. All right, nothing.
May this witness be excused?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
Special Agent, thank you. What's next, Mr. Lewin?
It's Mr. Milius.
Yes, Your Honor, we have a stipulation. This stipulation will actually go through perhaps into tomorrow, most likely. It is a series of videos, and it's stipulation 70. Just want to make sure that. Yeah.
This will be, Your Honor, on the Jarecki Smirling material.
Yes, I understand. I have stipulation number 70. So you'll read up to the point where a video is to be played, and then we'll, I don't know how long that first video is. Perhaps we'll start that at 1:30?
Yeah, I don't think that we'll get to the first video. We'll probably get to the first telephone call. So there are a series of exhibits as well as telephone call and videos.
So this, for the jury's understanding, the parties reached a stipulation. This is one that saves us quite a bit of time, and this pertains to what would have been testimony by Andrew Jarecki and Mark Smirling. So there is agreement as to things they would say. This goes on for several pages, and at several points in this stipulation, a video will be played or an audio will be played. So basically, this is the format. They'll follow this and read what is agreed upon, and then the film or audio track will be played for you in sequence. So that's why I say the stipulation will take days. Or take it till tomorrow. So you may proceed, Mr. Milius.
Thank you, Your Honor. The parties stipulate to the following. Andrew Jarecki and Mark Smirling are Emmy Award-winning documentary filmmakers. They're depicted in photograph admitted into evidence as Exhibit 264. And, Your Honor, I should stop and say that stipulation 70, can we call that People's 263?
Okay.
They were partners in a film production company called Hit the Ground Running. Jarecki and Smirling produced the 2003 Academy Award nominated documentary Capturing the Freedmans.
And just so it's clear, it's Mr. Jarecki on the right, Mr. Smirling on the left.
Okay.
A poster for the film is admitted into evidence as Exhibit 265. In preparation for the film, Jarecki and Smirling did an extensive investigation of the real-life case of Arnold and Jesse Friedman. Their documentary was strongly critical of the prosecution and reflected the filmmakers' belief that the subjects of the documentary, who had previously pleaded guilty to child sexual abuse, were factually innocent of the charges. Like Robert Durst, Jarecki and Smirling grew up in Westchester County, New York. For that reason, they were very familiar with the Durst story. In 2005, Jarecki and Smirling began research for a movie based on Durst's life. In 2010, that movie, All Good Things, was released in theaters. A DVD of the movie is admitted into evidence as Exhibit 260 and has previously been played for the jury. In advance of the release of All Good Things, Durst obtained a copy of the screenplay. After reading the script, he contacted the production company, Magnolia Productions, in an attempt to speak with Jarecki, who had directed the film. On October 28, 2010, Durst and Jarecki spoke for the first time. A recording of a part of their call is admitted into evidence as Exhibit 266 and will now be played.
Anyway, so I have an idea. I have no idea if it makes any sense, but you're the one to talk to about it. Sure. Now, the background is that I have over the years been approached by all the various interview shows. And I almost went on one of them first in the early 80s when this all first started to happen, with Connie Chung on ABC, and then right after I was acquitted, I'm on CBS, with whatever the name of the show is that they were doing back in 2004. The true crime kind of stuff. Right. But more recently, I have been approached, partly before, or I don't know if partly or primarily or whatever, more aggressive by those Friday evening interview shows, 2020 and Dateline, and a whole bunch of the lesser stars. And I am thinking about doing one of those, and while I was thinking about it, I remembered that the show you did, the movie you did on the Friedmans, you had both the movie and you had stuff, I think it was in court, and I think there was some discussions or something like that, which were really not part of the movie, but were a separate something or other. And that is my thought. That would it make sense for, as in some capacity, there to be an interview with me related to what's in the movie?
On November 6, 2010, Jarecki gave Durst a private screening of All Good Things at the Peninsula Hotel in Beverly Hills. On November 27, 2010, Jarecki sent Durst's lawyer, Steve Rabinowitz, a draft agreement outlining the ground rules for a proposed series of interviews with Durst. There were extensive negotiations, as evidenced by December 3, 2010 email between Jarecki and Rabinowitz, admitted into evidence as Exhibit 267.
Anyway, so I...
And if we go forward one, I'm going to read a section of that. This is the section from Steve Rabinowitz to Andrew Jarecki. It says, Andrew, thanks for your prompt response to my email Wednesday. It's good to know that you took our concerns seriously. With the air now cleared, Bob and I are hopeful that we can move forward productively. I've attached a revised version of the agreement, together with a black line, so that you can see the changes to your draft. Some of the changes are for clarity, but others are substantive. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to walk you through the changes. Bob has blessed this version of the agreement, so now it's up to you. If we are going forward, we need to know which of the dates from December 11th through 14th we can lock in. Can you let us know by the end of the day today? Best, Steve.
This is probably a good place to stop.
There's another, come.
Well,
Do you want that last,
let me,
the next sentence?
the last sentence?
No, I think a little, just a little bit further.
Yeah, one more sentence. On this same day, All Good Things was released in theaters.
Okay, that's, that makes sense. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll take our break until 1:30. Do not converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with the case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case. We'll see you at 1:30. Wait just a moment. All right, jurors have left the courtroom. Yes, Mr. Milius?
Sorry. We marked as 266 the phone call. I should also add that there's a 266A, which with the transcript of the phone call.
So let's just put that on the record. Do we need that? Does the jury need to hear that? So we'll do that. 266A will be the transcript. I just got a note from a juror who has, juror 1 has an appointment on August 6th, Friday at 10 a.m. Does, I
have a conflict on the 27th, and I will also say, Your Honor, for the record, that our client has asked to schedule because of the Fridays off, because it gives him time to recuperate and rest.
He has an appointment. I haven't even counted his Friday appointments either in this calculation, and thanks for reminding me, because he does have something coming up on a Friday, and we just haven't paid attention because we've not been in session on Fridays. So the defense doesn't want any Friday because
For his sake.
for Mr. Durst to have a chance to rest. All right, I'll think about that. I'm not changing anything yet, but we do need to look at our time to make sure that we complete this trial by the end of this month,
If that's true, Your Honor,
including deliberation.
then our position would be.
End of August, not this month.
End of August. I'm sorry, I'm living in the future. So your position, you have a position. Yes, Mr. Lewin.
Well, if we're not gonna end up being able to work Fridays, we have one alternate who is, it's either 3 or 4.
Three.
I know it's not 1 or 2, that is gonna miss a date. And our position would be that because the date she's going to be missing is far enough along, we have enough other alternates, and that's not a seated juror. We don't wanna lose the day. So I don't know if she was able to reschedule, or, I don't know if it's a he or she.
Yeah, well, just, I would have a dialogue with the juror about how the juror would, just a dialogue with the juror. So we're not, I'm not saying I'm going to do that either, but that's a possibility. If we're not going to keep her, we ought to do her the favor of letting her go sooner. But, all right, that's fine. You can, is that another comment, Mr. DeGuerin?
No.
Oh, go ahead, Dick. I have one, Your Honor.
Yes, Mr. Chesnut?
We also want to be mindful that suggesting we have to finish by a certain time, we have to be careful that they think that there has to be a rush if they want to take longer.
No, that's that's an excellent point, Mr. Chesnut. I don't want to rush a verdict, of course. We do have a juror who we will lose on September 1, and I just think, and there's also some flexibility possibly on the people's part as far as what they're going to present and how much the cross-examination there will be. That's within some control. Anyway, that's, obviously they can edit, and you can edit what you present. So both sides can give a little bit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Honor.
We'll see you after lunch.